First of all, congratulations on this debut EP. It is phenomenal. Like, wow.
Oh, thank you.
Jazz is such a hard genre to play, and this fusion just blew me away. There's been several EPs. Why has it taken it so long to have a debut album?
A number of different factors for that. Some of it had to do with just personnel changes. We've
Mhm.
gone through different drummers in the last 12 years or 11 years we've been around. So that's one. Two, really had to do with just finances. Um, we're putting this stuff out ourselves for the first few years. And then just with the pandemic, there was just an 18-month gap where we didn't do anything collaborative really. We actually were intending to release a full length right before the pandemic started, but we recorded 4 tracks that became our cognitive EP because Mike, our drummer, just had joined. We wanted to get something him out there with him on it, and so he was, vested as a member of the band, and that was really kind of the foundation of our current lineup. And then we were going to go record the second half and try to release that, and it just became EPs. Some of that for financial, but then with the pandemic, it just kind of stalled. And then during the sort of the pandemic, that 18-month window, we all went through some woodshedding. Keith, our bass player, he started off as a tenor sax. He rediscovered his sort of passion for playing that again.
Mhm.
And when we started just talking, kind of thinking about getting back together, we started working through how do we incorporate that in the band. Um, Also, at that time, I was getting into a lot of ambient music, droning. I have a project which I do with a duo with we do a lot of loops and drones. So bringing the looping technology in was kind of another thing. We wanted to at the time stay as a core trio, but basically kind of take the idea of bands like Rush or Rashawn Roland Kirk, where you're a multi instrumentalist, or you can even look at like people like Frank Zappa, where you have people in the band who are doing more than one instrument, sometimes at a time. Like with Rashawn Roland Kirk playing multiple horns
Mhm.
or what have you. But taking those different paradigms, bringing that into our sound, one, it just gives a more interesting live experience. Two, it pushes us as musicians. And Keith and I were really into that concept of like, all right, let's really explore how much we can actually play on stage and make it make it a show for people too. Like
Mhm.
we're a muso band, so we're progressive. We both come from a jazz tradition. People want to be entertained as well, but we also want to push ourselves artistically with like being able to pull on these different voicings and what have you. So it became more of a live performance thing first. So
Mhm.
um, but bringing all those pieces in really changed the way we wrote. Um, so we ended up at that 18-month window. We came back together. I had written a bunch of pieces myself. Keith had some ideas, and Keith and I were just kind of starting to get back in. Him and I started playing together decades ago. We both uh, really love jazz fusion. That's kind of the genre that really him and I became friends over. The bands like Return to Forever, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I know I'm kind of going a roundabout way of answering why it took so long but I'm getting to it. Um, but we went back to just learning jazz standards. That's when I started playing. Like, all right, let's just have some material we jam on. We both know how standards work. It's good practice, also sight reading. We are both in rock bands at the time, but this is a different discipline. It's good to keep that part of your brain going. So we had a whole cadre of tunes that him and I would just go play like coffee houses with or open mics or what have you, go play at the beach.
Mhm.
Um, Tunes that we started playing like decades ago and we just revisited and it all kind of came back. I'm like, hey, this is part of who we are. This is part of our identity. At the time we were kind of this progressive metal band, real heavy sounding, but like the jazz is like really important to our identity as well.
Mhm.
That's how we write. We use jazz thinking, jazz conceptualizations, and stuff what we learned in school. And just that's how we formulate things. So let's really just bring that in full force with the other stuff. So we ended up writing what became our last EP, Tropic of Cancer, which was released last year, and nine other pieces and a few other things that ended up on our full length.
Hmm.
So we went into the studio after another, I would say another 18 months because we had this material. We started refining it, arranging it. We took it on the road, like, all right, let's see how we can do this. And we kind of built our live set around these compositions, most of them original, but then some of the covers we'd bring in just to fill things in, and really develop that sound. And then it's like, all right, well, we have all this great material now, these, 15 or 16 different pieces. Let's just go into the studio, cut everything. And at the time we were thinking, let's just do a double album. Why not? Or a double release or whatever it is,
Hmm.
like, or just have, we have a whole pot of stuff that we recorded and we can just figure it out. Yeah, once we started getting into thinking about this with our engineer, he just kind of, and then looking at the breadth of material, it made more sense to split it up because we recorded Tropic of Cancer and all these other nine tunes at the same
Hmm.
time. Tropic of Cancer is a six-part suite that needed its own identity. It needed to be its own release. And that was like done as done can be. We weren't going to do anything else with that. We were happy with the way it came out for the recording. All right, fine. I wrote the composition for that, and I was there's a personal tie to that, but I wanted to have something on vinyl, a personal achievement. There's a
Hmm.
milestone, and I can get that to that later. Um, so we released that last year.
Hmm.
Uh, Hired a PR company. Our drummer Mike is on a different label with a company that or they work with the ear splits. And we were like, all right, well, I think we need to invest in some PR. Like that's just we're not signed, we're not, we're
Hmm.
still independent, but like we need somebody to kind of help us, because we put all this effort into trying to do something good and like went to the studio, did everything right, something we're very proud of. So, we released the album, we did the PR campaign with Earsplit. Earsplit helped us get signed. So
Hmm.
they introduced us to Laser's Edge Group, Ken Golden. We actually had our first meeting with him the day we released Tropic of Cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty ironic,
Hmm.
So, and that was a really just however you want it. If you use a sports analogy, it's a hat trick or it's
Hmm.
just, it's a 3 point layup. But it was kind of a done deal, right from pretty much from the first call. We really liked Ken's approach. And he was asking what our plans were for, because he was like, why aren't you guys putting out a full length? I was like, well, things cost money.
Hmm.
But we do have material we want to release as a full length. It's done. We're getting ready to mix it. So, and that just rolled right along. Ken was real instrumental in getting that. But the reality is we were waiting for the right opportunity to
Hmm.
release a full length album. And it came along and we took it. So now here we are. Whereas before it was just we were really trying to figure out who we were as a
Hmm.
band, and then there was some of it was just financial reasons, but some of it was just also trying to figure out like how do we do this? Like what is the strategy? Are we just trying to book shows, or are we really trying to? And we finally have reached a point of maturity with the group where it's like, all right, let's start doing these things in a different scale. So that's why there's a bunch of different reasons in that, but we finally reached a point with our group where it's like, all right, and now it's time for this, and then having the label come in with
Hmm.
us to put this out for us just worked really well. So.
Definitely. Being an independent artist, there are obstacles, and transitioning into being assigned and getting a label behind you comes with even different obstacles.
Oh
How
yeah,
has that
absolutely.
process been for the band?
Um, It hasn't been really that much different. It's more involved, you
Hmm.
know. There's more stakes, I guess you could say, because we have somebody who's vested in us now with the label. They're opening doors for us. And they're really actually working to get our long-term goals in focus of like being able to achieve the things we want to do, being able to like tour out, introducing us out to the East Coast. We've been a
Hmm.
Midwest region. And it's just people who tend to like progressive rock live on the coasts, or people
Mhm.
who like jazz fusion. The fan bases are more so on the coast. Chicago, for the most part, is more of a heavy music scene, or it's blues, or it's indie rock, but there's not really a huge progressive scene here. And there's not really that huge of a jazz fusion scene here. I know there's a niche market to begin with, but really the people who are into that stuff are on the coast. It's a lot
Mhm.
easier for us to get out east. So the longer term is like, all right, let's try to figure out a way to get out east. So now we have a door open for us. And so with that, it's like, all right, we're proactively working on touring. Ken's actually helping us get into some really nice venues
Mhm.
with that through the labels. So yeah, that's kind of the bigger thing, is just this idea of us being more of a national touring act, I guess you could
Mhm.
say, outside of getting outside of the Midwest. And then just more visibility. It really
Mhm.
has brought, especially with this release. Last year, we kind of took a step forward with our self-release of the EP, but this year it's a much larger scale with the visibility that we've seen, especially over with Europe, I would
Mhm.
say, and just seeing other people kind of come into the fold. So yeah,
That's
so there's
awesome.
more behind. Yeah,
For me, off that first track, you have a new fan. I
oh,
completely thought it was beautiful. It's
thanks.
amazing. For a lot of jazz fusion, especially when it goes into the progressive scene, you get it slowed down. It's they over try to rectify it so it could be heavy. For your band, it just seemed to fit. It seemed like you guys know this. It fits so perfectly well with the rest of the accompaniment. How difficult is it to get to a sound like that?
The first track I literally wrote within, I had it done with like in an hour.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I had a vision of it.
Hmm.
This something I wrote during the pandemic, during all the times with the unrest, with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all that
Hmm.
sort of stuff. Um, and then, I kind of had this idea and just ran with it, based off of John Coltrane's Alabama. We opened and closed with the piece
Hmm.
with a bit of an interpretive quoting of the tone poems. And then the chords that I pulled out and built the disintegration part, that's that middle piece, which is
Hmm.
kind of our own thing, is reflective of some of the chord changes that were actually being played by Coltrane's quartet. I just kind of like tried to extrapolate that a little bit further. Um, but then it kind of started really taking shape of like, well, it's Sons of Ross. So, and our drummer comes from a very different place. He comes from heavy music as well.
Hmm.
But he comes from like the math, noise, funk world. So there's an inherent heaviness that's just always going to be there with their sound. Um, but there are other elements. Yeah, in terms of the structure of the song, I brought that to the band complete,
Hmm.
and really we put the touches on with arranging harmonies, the horns, and then like finding the right beats and all that. That came together real quick, and the guys just really liked it. That was one of the first things we worked on when we got back together. And it went pretty quick from an arrangement standpoint, even with the studio. And then my colleague, who I play with in a drone band, he did the double bass. That's the fundamental tone of the whole piece.
Hmm.
I just told him to play along with John Coltrane's Alabama, and give me that, like just send it to me remotely. This was during the pandemic, and I built the whole thing off of that idea, of putting this all together. And then yeah, we recut everything once we went into the studio, and yeah, that was a real easy piece for us to record and arrange. So
That's incredible. And you guys have a few people who are doing guest spots on this album. How important was it for you guys to have that, to have, people come in and add to your sound?
they came in with very specific functions. We had some very specific ideas. For instance, the drone.
Mhm.
Uh, Keith wanted to have a flautist or flute player come in, to just to add some stuff with harmonies for some of the things we were arranging. We played around with a flute type sound on our. We both have guitar synthesizers. I use one on my guitar. He uses one on his bass. we're like, all right, let's get the real deal in since we're going into the studio. And there's just that like being able to work with
Hmm.
somebody for him too is like kind of our arranger for that. That was worth it. So we wanted to bring somebody in and just get that live feel, and a conversational feel going too.
Hmm.
So and then with the percussionist, same thing. He's somebody we played, our bands played together in different formats, and we knew he could bring in something that would be very complementary to what we're doing and play something that would fit the sort of the vibe we're going for that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on this album. It is
Thank you.
phenomenal. And,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for taking some time to talk.
All right. Thank you so much, Jesus. You have a good night, man.
You too.